What would you do if a silent white horse blocked your path and refused to leave until you followed it into the mountains? Ethan Cole thought it was just a lost animal, until it led him to a dying woman, hidden in the cold, whispering secrets no one in town dared to speak. But what they uncovered wasn't just a story of survival. It was something buried deep enough to tear an entire town apart. Because some truths don't stay hidden forever, and some guides are sent for a reason. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. Stay with me, because this is where the story truly begins. The winter of 1885 was slow to loosen its grip on the Bighorn Mountains. Snow still clung to the higher ridges like a stubborn memory, and the wind carried a dry, cutting cold that seemed to strip the land of sound itself. Ethan Cole rode alone along a narrow, forgotten road that wound between frozen grasslands and dark stretches of pine. His horse moved steadily beneath him, its breath rising in pale clouds with each step. Ethan had no reason to linger. He had just left Red Hollow behind, a place that had taken more from him than it had ever given. A season of hard labor had ended with empty pockets and quieter disappointment than he cared to admit. Now all he wanted was distance. Distance from the town, from the cold stairs, from the feeling that something there had never quite been right. The land ahead should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt watchful. The silence was wrong. No birds, no distant creak of trees, just wind sliding across snow and the dull rhythm of hooves. Then his horse stopped. It didn't stumble or shy. It simply halted, muscles tightening beneath him as if it had reached an invisible boundary. Ethan frowned and looked ahead. A white horse stood in the middle of the road. It was perfectly still, its coat dusted with a thin layer of snow, its mane barely shifting in the wind. No saddle, no rider, no rope trailing behind it. Just the animal itself planted squarely in Ethan's path, as though it had been waiting. Ethan exhaled slowly. You lost, or you just in my way? He swung down from his saddle boots, crunching softly against the frozen ground. As he stepped closer, the white horse moved, but only a few paces back. It didn't bolt. It didn't panic. It simply retreated just enough to keep its distance, then stopped again. Ethan's eyes narrowed. That wasn't how lost horses behaved. He noticed the strap around its neck, then a worn piece of leather etched with markings he recognized from his time traveling west. Lakota. Old, faded, but deliberate. The horse turned its head, glanced toward the line of trees, and began to walk. 3 steps. Then it stopped. It turned back and waited. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. No. He shook his head and returned to his own horse, grabbing the reins. Not my business. He pulled himself into the saddle and nudged his horse forward. The white horse moved faster this time. It circled wide, cutting across the road and stepping directly in front of him again. Ethan's horse snorted ears, pinning back, refusing to move another inch. Ethan let out a breath, irritation rising, but beneath it, something else. A thin edge of unease. You trying to tell me something, he muttered. The white horse didn't move. It simply stood there, breathing slow and steady, eyes fixed on him. Then it turned again and walked toward the trees. Stopped. Looked back. Waited. Ethan felt it then, that strange pull between instinct and reason. He knew better than to follow anything into the mountains without cause. But nothing about this felt random anymore. He checked the rifle slung over his shoulder, tightened his coat, and slid back down from the saddle. 1 mile, he said under his breath. That's it. The horse moved the moment he spoke, as though it had been listening all along. It led him off the road and into the trees. The forest swallowed the last of the open light. Pine branches stretched overhead, blocking the pale afternoon sun, turning everything into muted shades of gray and green. The snow grew patchy beneath their feet, broken by hard earth and scattered stone. Ethan quickly realized the horse wasn't wandering. It chose its path carefully, skirting deep drifts, crossing frozen ground, slipping through narrow breaks between trees, as if it had traveled this route many times before. That made his stomach tighten. A lost animal didn't move like this. The wind shifted as they climbed higher, turning into a long, hollow whistle through the trunks. Ethan caught glimpses of old tracks beneath the snow, faint impressions half erased, but there. Someone had been here before. He slowed. The white horse slowed with him. He stopped. It stopped. Then it turned its head again, waiting. The air felt different now. Thicker. Heavier. "All right," Ethan muttered. "I'm still here." They pressed on. The terrain steepened, turning from soft forest floor to slick stone coated with thin ice. Ethan had to dismount again, leading his horse carefully as he followed the white one upward along the slope. That's when he saw the first real sign. A tear of dark cloth caught on a low branch. He reached out, pulling it free. The fabric was rough, torn sharply and stiff with frozen moisture. Nearby, the snow had been disturbed. A faint drag mark stretched across the ground before disappearing under a drift. Ethan crouched, brushing away ice with his gloved hand. A few drops of blood, dark and hardened, clung to the surface beneath. He straightened slowly. "This ain't about a horse," he said quietly. Ahead, the white horse moved again, this time faster. It led him to a narrow break in the rocks, almost invisible, unless you were standing directly in front of it. Two stone walls angled inward, blocking the wind and forming a small, hidden hollow. The horse stopped there. It lowered its head and let out a soft, low sound. Ethan froze. A faint answer came from within. Not wind, not an echo. A voice. He drew his gun and stepped forward. The air inside the hollow was colder, damp, with the scent of old smoke, wet earth. And something metallic beneath it. Blood. He moved around a large rock boot, scraping against the frozen ground. And then he saw her. A woman lay curled on her side, half buried in a thin layer of snow. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled and stiff with ice. Her lips were blue, her skin pale in a way that had nothing to do with winter alone. Ethan dropped to one knee beside her. "Hey." No response. He pressed his fingers to her neck. A pulse. Faint, weak, still there. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. All right, you're still with me." She stirred at the touch, her body trembling, as though every muscle had forgotten how to hold warmth. The white horse stepped closer. It lowered its head until its breath brushed her face. The woman's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they didn't focus. Then they did. She saw the horse, and something changed. "Ghost wind," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "You came back." Ethan's head snapped toward the animal. Ghost wind. She knew it, which meant the horse hadn't found her by chance. It had come back for her. And when she couldn't move anymore, it had gone to find him. Ethan didn't hesitate again. He stripped off his outer coat and wrapped it tightly around her shoulders, lifting her carefully. She weighed almost nothing. Too light. "Stay with me," he muttered. She didn't answer. He secured her onto his horse, tying her in place as gently as he could manage. The white horse, Ghost Wind, had already turned, already moving. Ethan followed. They climbed higher away from the hidden hollow, the forest thinning as the slope sharpened. The light faded quickly, the sky turning steel gray above them. Ethan knew he couldn't make it back to the main road before dark. Ghost Wind seemed to know that too. It led them not downward, but sideways along the mountain toward a dark shape tucked beneath a rock overhang. A cabin, old, weathered, half forgotten, but standing. Ethan forced the frozen door open and carried the woman inside. The air smelled stale but dry, better than the wind outside. He worked quickly, feeding what little wood remained into the fire pit, coaxing flame from embers and scraps. Heat came slowly, but it came. He melted snow, lifting her head just enough to let a few drops of water pass her lips. She coughed weakly. Alive. He checked her arms, her legs. Bruises, cuts, rope marks. This wasn't just exposure. Someone had done this to her. Ghost Wind stood outside the doorway, unmoving, its silhouette framed by the fading light like a silent sentinel. As the warmth spread, the woman began to shake harder. Fever took hold. Her lips moved again. Red Hollow. Ethan stilled. The mine. He leaned closer. Who did this to you? Don't trust them. Her breathing quickened uneven. My father. They're still there. Her eyes opened once more, unfocused, filled with something deeper than pain. Fear. Not of the cold. Not of the dark. Of people. They buried the truth, she whispered. Then she slipped back into unconsciousness. Ethan sat there for a long moment, staring at her. At the marks on her wrists. At the dirt on her clothes. At the horse outside that had refused to leave until he followed. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't bad luck. He gently opened her hand, prying her stiff fingers apart. A small piece of metal fell into his palm. A broken lock fragment stamped with a symbol he recognized from Red Hollow. Hollow Ridge Mine. Ethan's jaw tightened. Outside, the wind shifted again. And far off in the distance, barely there, he thought he heard something. Hoofbeats. Faint. Then gone. He looked toward the door. Ghost Wind hadn't moved. But its ears were forward now, fixed on the darkness beyond the trees. Watching. Waiting. Ethan understood then. That 1 mile had ended a long time ago. And whatever this woman had escaped was already looking for her again. Why was a wounded native woman left to die deep in the mountains? And who was she running from? What secret could be so dangerous that someone would hunt her down to keep it buried? Tell us what you think, and don't forget to subscribe before we dive into the most intense part of the story. Morning came slow and pale over the mountains, but the cold inside the cabin never truly left. Ethan had barely slept. He sat with his back against the wall, rifle resting across his knees, eyes shifting between the door and the woman on the narrow bed. Lena's breathing was still shallow, her skin flushed with fever. The heat from the fire had helped, but not enough. She needed more than melted snow and scraps of warmth. She needed real medicine, something this broken-down cabin couldn't provide. Ethan stood rubbing his hands together, already knowing what had to be done. He didn't like it. Leaving her alone, even for a few hours, felt wrong. But staying meant watching her fade without a fight. And he wasn't about to let that happen, not after everything it had taken just to get her here alive. He moved quietly, placing the small revolver within reach of her hand. If you wake up, he muttered more to himself than to her, you keep this close. Outside, Ghost Wind stood exactly where it had been through the night. Snow dusted its back again, but it hadn't shifted far, as if the cabin itself were something it had been told to guard. Ethan stepped out, tightening his coat. The horse turned its head slightly, watching him. I'll be back, he said. The animal didn't move. He hesitated a moment longer, then swung into his saddle and turned down toward the Red Hollow. The town sat low in the valley, just as he remembered, gray buildings pressed together beneath a sky that never seemed to fully clear. From a distance, it looked like any other mining settlement that had outlived its purpose. But as Ethan rode closer, the feeling returned. That same weight, that same silence. It wasn't empty. People were there, moving behind windows, crossing the street, but something about them felt withdrawn. Eyes flicked toward him, then away. A door shut. Another. No greetings. No casual nods. No curiosity about a stranger riding in. Ethan slowed his horse as he entered the main street, scanning faces. Nobody lingered long enough to meet his gaze. "This place ain't just tired," he murmured. "It's hiding." He tied his horse outside the general store and stepped inside the door, creaking behind him. The warmth hit him first, followed by the smell of dried goods and dust. The shopkeeper looked up, eyes dropping immediately to the gun at Ethan's hip. "What do you need, medicine?" Ethan said. "Fever infection. Bandages." The man moved without asking questions, pulling items from shelves. His hands worked quickly, but his eyes kept drifting back to Ethan, measuring him. Ethan added a few more things to the counter: coffee flour, salt, jerky. Then casually, he asked, "Road to Hollow Ridge still open?" The man froze for half a second. "Mine's been shut down for years." Ethan leaned slightly on the counter. "Then, why are there fresh wagon tracks heading that way?" Silence stretched between them. The shopkeeper resumed packing faster, now avoiding eye contact. Some questions cost more than supplies around here. Ethan didn't push. He paid, took the bundle, and stepped back out into the street. The cold hit him again, sharper this time. He walked a short distance before stopping a passing man. "You seen a white horse around leather-strapped Lakota markings?" The man's expression tightened. "You'd be better off forgetting that." Another woman pulled her child closer, steering them away without a word. Two men near the saloon went quiet mid-conversation. No one looked him in the eye. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he muttered. "You all know something." He made his way to the Reed house, pushing open the door to the small inn. The interior was dim lit by a low fire and a single lamp on the counter. Martha Reed stood behind it, older than most here. Her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze always drifting toward the door as if expecting trouble. Ethan approached. "I need something hot to go." She nodded, moving automatically until he spoke again. "You ever hear of a white horse up in the hills?" The spoon in her hand slipped clattering against the floor. She didn't pick it up right away. Instead, she looked at him. Really looked this time, her eyes searching his face. It came back. Ethan didn't answer. "What about Hollow Ridge?" he asked. Her face drained of color. She glanced toward the window, toward the sheriff's office across the street. "That place," she whispered. "It swallowed too many." "Accidents?" Ethan pressed. She shook her head slowly. "Not accidents." Before he could ask anything else, she shoved a wrapped bundle of food across the counter. "Take it and leave." Ethan frowned. "What's going on in this town?" Martha leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "If the horse found you, then the town already has." The door creaked behind him. Ethan turned. Sheriff Walter Briggs stood there, hat low, coat buttoned neatly, a polite smile sitting just a little too comfortably on his face. "Morning," Briggs said. "You passing through or settling in?" Ethan met his gaze. "Just buying supplies." Briggs's eyes dropped briefly to the bundle in Ethan's hands. "Someone's sick up in the hills," Ethan shrugged. Horse took a bad step. Briggs didn't react, but he didn't believe it either. "You seen anyone else out there?" the sheriff asked casually. "Strangers, maybe." The question was too precise. Ethan gave him a neutral look. "Just trees and snow." Briggs studied him for a moment longer, then smiled again. Mountains have a way of swallowing men who ride where they don't belong. I'll keep that in mind. Do that. Ethan left the inn, but instead of heading straight out of town, he cut down a narrow alley behind the buildings. He didn't like being watched, and he knew he was. A gust of wind lifted the edge of a tarp, covering a wagon near a storage shed. Ethan slowed just enough to glance inside. Wooden crates. New, stamped clearly on the side, Dynamite Hollow Ridge Mine. His jaw tightened, so the mine wasn't as dead as they claimed. Footsteps echoed nearby. Ethan moved on. Before he could leave, Briggs called him into the sheriff's office. Just a few more questions, the man said. Ethan stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust. The room was small, orderly, too orderly. Papers stacked neatly, weapons cleaned and lined up. And on the wall, a photograph. A group of men standing outside the entrance to Hollow Ridge Mine. Ethan stepped closer. He recognized Briggs, immediately younger, standing among them. But something was wrong. The edge of the photograph had been cut roughly, unevenly. What remained showed part of a leather sleeve. Lakota patterns. A hand wearing a silver bracelet. Someone had been removed. Deliberately. You find what you're looking for. Briggs's voice came from behind him. Ethan turned. Just looking, he said. Briggs stepped forward, subtly blocking the photo. Best not to go digging in things that don't concern you. Ethan gave a slight nod. Wasn't planning on it. But they both knew that was a lie. He left Red Hollow under watchful eyes. He didn't take the direct path back. Instead, he rode along a frozen creek, circling wide to break his trail. Halfway up the slope, he caught movement on a distant ridge. A rider. Watching. Then gone. Damn, Ethan muttered. He urged his horse forward. When the cabin came into view, something felt off immediately. Ghost wind wasn't still. It moved restlessly around the clearing, head high, ears alert. Ethan dismounted quickly, scanning the snow. Tracks, not his, not Ghost Wind's. Boot prints, heavy, fresh. They led right up to the cabin and stopped. A broken branch lay near the back wall, angled just enough to suggest someone had leaned there watching. Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. They found us. He moved inside quickly. Lena stirred as he entered, her eyes opening slowly, clearer now, despite the lingering fever. You came back, she said weakly. Had to, Ethan replied, setting the supplies down. He helped her sit up, giving her water, then a small amount of food. She watched him carefully. You went to town? Yeah. And they're lying, he said simply. She closed her eyes briefly. I know. Ethan hesitated, then asked Hollow Ridge. What happened there? Lena was silent for a long time. Then she spoke. My father, Daniel Greyhawk. He was invited to Red Hollow. They said they wanted to make peace, share the land. Ethan didn't interrupt. He went, she continued. With others, they took Ghostwind. They believed it would be a fair meeting. Her voice hardened. They never came back. Ethan's jaw tightened. The town said they left. That they went north, she said. But my father didn't run. He didn't abandon his people. What do you think happened? She met his eyes. I think they were buried. Years later, she had followed rumors. A sealed tunnel. A part of the mine no one would talk about. I went there, she said. I got inside. And they found me. Her voice dropped. Clay Turner and the others. They tied me up, asked what I saw. Ethan felt a cold edge creep into his chest. What did they say? They talked about a lockbox, a list of names. blowing the tunnel if anyone got too close. She swallowed. I escaped when they were moving supplies, but they were coming back with dynamite. Ethan glanced toward the door, and the horse, he asked. Her expression softened slightly. Ghost Wind was my father's. After he disappeared, no one could catch him. No one could ride him. She looked at Ethan. He only comes back when he has to. Ethan exhaled slowly. And he brought me to you. Lena nodded. My father used to say. She hesitated, then continued. If Ghost Wind ever returns alone, follow him. He will know what men try to hide. Ethan leaned back, absorbing it. He hadn't chosen this, but he wasn't walking away either. A branch snapped outside. Ghost Wind's head snapped toward the trees. Ethan blew out the lamp, instantly pulling Lena down from the bed. Quiet, he whispered. Through the crack in the wall, he saw them. Figures moving between the trees, torches, rifles. Clay Turner stepped into view, face partially covered, eyes scanning the cabin. Girl, he called out into the darkness. You should have stayed buried with the rest of them. Lena's breath caught. Behind them, a mule shifted its back, loaded with crates. Ethan didn't need to read the markings again. Dynamite. They're not just here for you, he murmured. Lena nodded, fear and resolve mixing in her eyes. They're here to finish it. Ethan checked his rifle, then handed her the revolver. Then we don't give them the chance. Ethan moved fast. He lowered the flame in the stove until the cabin fell into a dim, flickering half-dark. Then he grabbed 2 old blankets from the bed, rolled them together, and shaped them beneath the covers to look like a body lying still. He shoved the table against the front door, making it appear as if he meant to hold the cabin from inside. Lena watched him from the floor, pale but alert. They'll blow the door in, she whispered. I'm counting on it, Ethan said. Her eyes sharpened. You're not staying inside. No. He lifted a loose plank near the back corner of the cabin. Beneath it was a narrow root cellar barely deep enough for a person to crouch in. It smelled of old earth, damp wood, and cold stone. You get down there, Ethan told her. Do not come out unless you hear me knock 3 times. If someone else opens it first, you shoot. Lena looked at the revolver he placed in her hand. Her fingers trembled around the grip, but she did not refuse it. I've never killed a man, she said. Then pray you don't have to start tonight. She clutched the broken lock fragment from Hollow Ridge Mine in her other hand, pressing it into her palm, as if pain might keep her steady. Above the wind, Clay's voice carried through the trees. Girl, come on out. Make this easy. Ethan helped Lena into the cellar and lowered the plank back into place. Then he took his rifle, moved toward the rear door, and opened it just enough to slip outside. Ghost Wind stood there in the darkness. The white horse did not startle. It only turned and stepped toward a narrow break between 2 rocks behind the cabin. Ethan followed without a word. The path was nearly invisible. A man could have passed within 3 feet of it and never seen it. Ghost Wind moved through the gap with calm certainty, leading Ethan up a shallow rise behind the cabin. From there, Ethan could see the entire clearing below. Clay had spread his men in a rough half-circle around the cabin. 2 were near the front door. 1 carried a lantern. Another worked to unfasten a crate from the mule's back. Clay himself stood near the broken fence rail, revolver in hand, his face half covered by a dark scarf. They believed Ethan and Lena were trapped inside. Ethan settled behind a fallen pine, laid his rifle across the trunk, and aimed at the lantern. He fired. The glass shattered. The flame vanished. Darkness swallowed the front of the cabin. Clay's men shouted and scattered. Inside, one of them yelled, "He's shooting from inside!" They opened fire on the windows, bullets tearing through old shutters and punching holes in the rotted wall. Ethan moved, before the echoes died. He slid behind another tree, fired once more, then moved again. The mountain threw his shots back at them from every direction. A man spun toward the east, another fired blindly toward the south. Clay cursed, trying to rally them. "Hold your ground. He's one man." Ethan fired again, striking the dirt near Clay's boots. Clay jumped back, and for the first time doubt cut through his arrogance. They were not surrounding Ethan. Ethan was hunting them. Inside the root cellar, Lena pressed her back against the cold dirt wall and listened to the gunfire rattle the cabin above her. Dust drifted down through the cracks. Every shot seemed to land inside her bones. She held the revolver in both hands, trying to keep it pointed upward. Then something heavy crashed through the broken window. She smelled powder. A second later, the cabin exploded. The blast slammed through the floorboards. Lena curled into herself as the world roared above her. Wood screamed. Glass shattered. Snow and smoke poured through the cracks. For one terrible moment, she thought the ceiling would collapse and bury her alive beside the secret she had carried this far. But the cellar held. Above her, Clay's men shouted. "Check it," Clay barked. "Don't burn it all yet. Find the girl. Find the key. If she had the lock piece, she knows where the box is." Ethan crouched in the trees, went still. The key. The box. Clay was not only after Lena. He was after something buried in Hollow Ridge Mine. Another man shouted, "Sheriff said if we don't get back before dawn, he'll seal the east shaft himself." That was all Ethan needed to hear. Briggs was behind it. The sheriff had not been reacting to Lena's escape. He had been preparing to finish a job that had begun years ago. Ethan waited until the men spread out through the smoke, then circled back toward the rear of the cabin. The front wall had been torn open. The bed was shredded, the blanket body blown apart, and Clay's men were cursing at shadows. Ethan reached the back corner and tapped the floor 3 times. A pause. Then the plank lifted. Lena emerged, coughing, eyes watering from smoke. Ethan grabbed her arm and pulled her up. "You all right?" She nodded, though her face was gray with shock. A man came through the smoke and saw them. Lena raised the revolver and fired. The shot went wide, striking the doorframe, but it was enough. The man flinched. Ethan fired once and dropped him before he could lift his rifle. Lena stared at the fallen man, breathing hard. Ethan took her by the shoulders. "Look at me. You're still here." Her jaw tightened. Fear was still in her eyes, but something else had joined it. Resolve. "I can walk," she said. "Then we move." Ghost Wind was waiting near the trees. The horse led them away from the ruined cabin, not down toward Red Hollow, but toward the darker ridge above the valley. Ethan and Lena followed the churned snow where the mule had been dragged uphill. The trail was fresh cut by wagon ruts and heavy boot prints. Whoever had been carrying dynamite had been moving between the cabin and Hollow Ridge Mine all night. Lena recognized the path before Ethan did. "This was the old supply road," she said quietly. "My father marked it once. He said miners forgot roads faster than the earth did." Ahead, through a break in the pines, Ethan saw a faint glow against the rock face. Lantern light. Hollow Ridge Mine was not abandoned. It was awake. The mine entrance appeared under a leaning wall of stone, half hidden by brush and weathered boards. At first glance, it looked sealed and forgotten. But the boards were newer than the dirt smeared across them. Someone had tried to make fresh work look old. Ethan crouched near the entrance. There were boot prints everywhere, melted wax on the ground, tobacco ash still warm enough to stain his glove. Lena reached past him and touched a carving in the stone beside the entrance. 3 short lines beneath a crescent. "My father's mark," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. "You sure?" She nodded. "He used it to mark safe passages. He was here." Ethan pried away enough boards for them to slip inside. Cold air breathed out of the mine. It smelled of wet stone, old timber, and something trapped too long in the dark. They entered with one lantern between them. Ethan went first, rifle ready. Lena followed close behind, revolver in hand, the broken lock fragment pressed into her palm. The deeper they went, the more the mine changed. This was not random decay. Certain beams had been replaced, certain passages cleared, others blocked. Then they reached a side tunnel. It had been sealed with rock, not collapsed, sealed. Ethan knelt and ran his hand along the stacked stones, and the support beams braced from the outside. "This wasn't an accident," he said. Lena stared at the barrier. It was a door. On one of the beams was an old rusted lock plate broken in half. Lena lifted the metal fragment from her palm and held it against the damage. It fit. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Everything Lena had feared, everything Red Hollow had buried in whispers, waited behind that wall. Ethan found a small bundle of dynamite in a nearby crate. He cut the fuse short, but not too short, choosing a weak point low along the side of the rock pile. Lena stepped back. "If it brings the tunnel down, it won't," Ethan said. "Not if the mountain's done holding its breath." They sheltered around a bend. The explosion was small, sharp, and violent enough to send a dust rolling through the passage. Pebbles rained from the ceiling. Lena covered her mouth. Ethan waited until the worst of the dust settled, then moved forward. A dark gap had opened. From inside came a smell that made Lena's face go empty. Earth, rot, old cloth, death. Ethan squeezed through first, then reached back for Lena. The lantern light spread across the chamber. Bones lay across the floor. Some were scattered. Some were curled where bodies had fallen. A few still had strips of old leather around the wrists. Near them lay silver bracelets, beadwork torn hides, ceremonial arrowheads, and pieces of clothing preserved by the cold underground air. Lena sank to her knees. Her hand moved over the ground until it stopped on a necklace of silver and dark stone. She picked it up with shaking fingers. "My father wore this," she said. Her voice did not break. It went quiet in a way that was worse. Ethan took off his hat. The truth was no longer a rumor. It was here under the mountain, hidden behind stone by men who had gone home afterward and built a town over the silence. "They never left," Lena whispered. "No," Ethan said. "They didn't." At the far end of the chamber, Ethan found an iron lockbox, half covered by dust and rock. Its handle was rusted, its hinges stiff, but it had not been destroyed. He smashed the lock with the butt of his rifle. Inside were ledgers, folded maps, land agreements, and a list of names. The writing was faded, but readable. Daniel Greyhawk, 3 elders, 2 witnesses, a negotiation at Hollow Ridge. Then another page, profits divided after the removal of native obstruction. Forged land claims, silver shares distributed to the sheriff's office, the bank, the mine owners, and the founding families of Red Hollow. Near the bottom of one page, written in a tighter hand, was a line that made Lena's breath stop. "No survivors beyond the east shaft." She looked at Ethan. The whole town was in that box. Not every person living in it now, but its fathers, its founders, its money, its land, its church bell, its bank windows, its respectable names. Red Hollow had not been built beside a mine. It had been built on a grave. A slow clap echoed from the main tunnel. Ethan turned, rifle rising. Sheriff Walter Briggs stepped out of the darkness with Clay Turner beside him and 2 more men behind. Clay's coat was torn and blackened from the fight at the cabin, but his gun hand was steady. Briggs no longer wore his polite smile. His eyes moved from the open chamber to the bones, then to the lockbox. "So," he said. The dead finally found themselves a voice. Lena stood clutching her father's necklace. Briggs looked at her with disgust. "Your father should have stayed buried with his pride." Ethan stepped in front of her. Clay raised his revolver. "Hand over the box." Briggs sighed, as if disappointed by the inconvenience. "You don't understand what you're holding, Mr. Cole. That box leaves this mine red hollow, tears itself apart. Families ruined, land contested, men hanged for the sins of dead fathers." Ethan's face hardened. "Then maybe it deserves to." Clay fired first. The bullet shattered the lantern on the wall, throwing the tunnel into chaos. Ethan shoved Lena behind an ore cart as sparks and darkness filled the air. Gunfire exploded in the narrow space, each shot deafening each flash, showing faces in fragments. Clay's snarl Briggs, retreating Lena's hand tight around the revolver. Ethan fired toward muzzle flashes, then moved low, using the echo to make his position uncertain. Lena saw one of Briggs's men trying to flank them. She aimed at the rope, holding up a cracked support beam, and fired. The rope snapped. The beam crashed down, blocking the man's path and sending him sprawling. Clay charged through the smoke, reaching for the locked box. Ethan met him halfway. They slammed into the wall, fists and elbows, striking in the dark. Clay was stronger than he looked, full of panic and hate. He drove Ethan backward toward the old rail line, but outside the mine, Ghost Wind suddenly screamed. The sound echoed through the entrance. The horses outside panicked. Men shouted. A pack mule brayed and tore loose. Clay's eyes flicked toward the sound for half a second. It was enough. Ethan drove his shoulder into Clay, knocked him off balance, and fired. Clay collapsed beside the rusted track, staring up into the dark, as though only now realizing that the grave he had tried to protect had opened for him too. Briggs did not stop. He had already grabbed a satchel from one of his men and was backing toward the main shaft. Ethan saw the fuse cord hanging from it. "Briggs," he shouted. The sheriff's face twisted. "This town will not be destroyed by a girl and a damned horse." He struck a match. Lena lunged forward, but Ethan caught her arm as dust began to fall from the ceiling. The fuse caught. Briggs vanished into the smoke toward the main entrance. The hiss of the burning cord filled the tunnel. Ethan grabbed the lockbox. Lena took the list and her father's necklace. Behind them lay the dead. Ahead of them was a man willing to bury 2 more lives to keep Red Hollow clean. Then Ghost Wind screamed again. Not from the entrance, from somewhere else. Lena froze, listening. "The east vent," she said. "There's another passage." They followed the sound, moving through dust and darkness toward a thin current of freezing air. Behind a curtain of loose rock and old timbers, Ethan found a narrow side tunnel almost completely hidden. On the wall was Daniel Greyhawk's mark, 3 lines beneath a crescent. Ghost Wind had led them into the truth. Now it was leading them out. Ethan smashed through the rotten boards with his rifle butt. Lena crawled first, clutching the documents to her chest. Ethan pushed the lockbox through after her, then squeezed out just as the mine roared behind them. They emerged on a rocky slope above the main entrance. Ghost Wind stood there, white against the smoke snow dusting its mane. Below, Briggs staggered out of the mine, thinking he had won. Then he looked up and saw Ethan. Alive. With the lockbox, Ethan slid down the slope, cutting him off before he could reach his horse. Briggs raised his pistol. His face was streaked with soot now, his hat gone. His mask of authority stripped away. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said. Red Hollow cannot survive this. Ethan aimed steadily. Then it should have learned to live without murder. Briggs tried one last time. Name your price. Silver, land, a sheriff's badge somewhere else. You walk away richer than any cowhand has a right to be. Ethan looked at the smoke pouring from the mine, then at Lena standing above with the evidence in her arms. No. Briggs's expression collapsed into rage. Before he could fire the delayed charge inside, the mine detonated. A section of the main entrance blew outward. The explosion thundered down the valley, sending black smoke and shattered stone into the morning sky. The sound carried all the way to Red Hollow. By the time the smoke began to thin, people were already coming. Riders, wagons, men on foot, women wrapped in shawls, children held back behind their mothers. They gathered at the base of Hollow Ridge, staring at the ruined mine, at the sheriff with a gun in his hand, at Ethan standing opposite him, and at Lena Greyhawk walking through the smoke with an iron box in her arms. Then they saw Ghostwind. The white horse stepped behind her like a spirit returned from an old story. Several of the older townspeople recoiled. One man whispered, "God help us." Lena carried the lockbox into the open and set it down in the snow. No one spoke. The silence of Red Hollow had followed them up the mountain, but now it was different. It was no longer secrecy. It was dread. Briggs turned toward the crowd. This woman is a thief. That man is an outsider. They broke into private mining property and murdered enough, Ethan said. Martha Reed pushed through the gathering, pale and trembling. She looked at Briggs, then at the box. For the first time, she did not look away. Lena opened the box. She pulled out the old ledger and unfolded the list of names. Her voice shook when she began, but with each word, it grew stronger. She read her father's name first, Daniel Greyhawk. Then the names of those who had entered Hollow Ridge with him. Then she read the agreement that was never meant to be honored. The forged land transfer, the division of profits, the order to seal the east shaft. Finally, she read the signatures. Walter Briggs, the mine owners, the bank founder, the families whose names still hung above storefronts in Red Hollow. The crowd began to break apart, not physically, but inside. A man stumbled backward when he recognized his father's handwriting. A woman covered her mouth and began to cry. Someone muttered that it was impossible. Someone else said they had always known. Martha Reed stepped forward. "I saw them that night," she said. All eyes turned to her. She swallowed hard. "I was 16. My father ran the stable then. I saw men come back from the mine before dawn. Their coats were muddy. One had blood on his sleeve. My father told me if I spoke, there would be no town left by spring." Her voice cracked. So I stayed quiet. An old miner near the back removed his hat. "I heard them," he said, "behind the rock. Not long. Just long enough to know men were still alive when that shaft was sealed." A sound passed through the crowd, anger, grief, denial, shame. Some demanded Briggs be arrested. Others shouted that the past was dead and should stay dead. A merchant cried that their land titles would be ruined. Another man yelled that sons should not pay for fathers. Lena stood in the middle of them all. "The dead are not asking you to become them," she said. "They are asking you to stop lying about them." That silenced more people than shouting ever could have. Briggs took a step back, then another. While the crowd argued, he edged toward his horse, one hand slipping into his sleeve. Ghostwind moved first. The white horse surged forward, not striking him, but close enough that Briggs's horse reared in panic. Briggs stumbled. The small pistol hidden in his sleeve flashed. Ethan fired. The bullet knocked the gun from Briggs's hand. For a moment, no one moved. Then two townsmen grabbed Briggs by the arms. Another tore the sheriff's badge from his coat. Martha picked it up from the snow, looked at it, as if it had become something filthy, and threw it at his feet. Walter Briggs, who had held Red Hollow's fear in his fist for years, stood powerless at the mouth of the mine he had tried to bury. Ethan ordered the lockbox sealed in plain sight until federal marshals could arrive. A rider was sent to Cheyenne before noon. Those named in the ledger were held for questioning. No one in Red Hollow could pretend the matter belonged only to town law anymore. The truth had escaped them. Before they left Hollow Ridge, Lena returned to the side passage where the hidden chamber lay beyond the stone. She placed Daniel Greyhawk's necklace on a clean rock near the entrance. One by one, she spoke the names she had read from the ledger. The wind moved through the mine mouth low and mournful, carrying her words into the dark. Martha Reed was the first from Red Hollow to kneel. Then the old miner. Then a few others. Lena did not bless them. She did not forgive them. Not yet. She only stood before the mountain and gave the dead back their names. Ethan watched from behind her, hat in hand, understanding something he had not before. Justice was not only a rope around a guilty man's neck. Sometimes justice was a name spoken after years of silence. Sometimes it was a grave uncovered. Sometimes it was the living finally forced to look down and see what they had been standing on. Days later, federal marshals arrived. Briggs and the others tied to the ledgers were taken away under guard. The mine was placed under investigation. Red Hollow changed overnight, though not cleanly. Some doors remained shut. Some people still whispered. But the silence had been broken, and once broken, it could not be made whole again. Lena stayed to testify and protect the burial site. Ethan prepared to leave. He did not think of himself as a hero. He had followed a horse into the mountains, nothing more. But as he rode toward the edge of the valley, people who once refused to meet his eyes now watched him with something like respect. Near the last rise before the road bent east, he stopped. Ghost Wind stood on the hill above Red Hollow. The white horse looked down over the town, its mane moving softly in the morning mist. Sunlight touched its body until it seemed less like flesh than memory. Ethan started to dismount. Lena, standing beside him, gently caught his arm. "Don't," she said. He looked at her. "He doesn't belong to anyone now," she said. Maybe he never did. Ghost Wind lowered its head once, as if acknowledging them both. Then it turned. Step by step, it walked into the mist gathered along the ridge. No hoofbeats carried back, no branch cracked. Its white shape blurred, thinned, and vanished into the morning. Ethan stared after it. Will he come back? Lena's eyes stayed on the empty ridge. He only stayed until the truth was spoken. Ethan held those words in silence. Then he turned his horse toward the open road. Behind him, Red Hollow began the painful work of becoming something other than a lie. Ahead of him stretched the long country beneath the bighorn sky. 3 weeks after the explosion at Hollow Ridge Mine, Red Hollow was no longer the same town. It still had the same muddy street, the same false front buildings, the same gray ridges rising behind it, like the ribs of some buried animal. But the silence had changed. Before, it had been a silence of fear and secrets. Now it was a silence of accusation. Every closed door, every drawn curtain, every whisper outside the general store seemed to ask the same question. How much did you know? Federal marshals had come and gone, carrying ledgers, maps, bones, and statements toward Cheyenne. Sheriff Walter Briggs sat in a guarded cell waiting for trial. Several of Red Hollow's wealthiest families had been questioned. Some had lost control of land claims overnight. Banknotes were being challenged. Old deeds were being re-examined. Men who had once walked the street with polished boots and raised chins now kept their heads low. But justice moved slowly. Too slowly. And in that delay, the town split in two. There were those who wanted the full truth, told no matter what it cost. They left flowers near the temporary markers at Hollow Ridge. They spoke Daniel Greyhawk's name out loud. They lowered their eyes when Lena passed, not from contempt, but from shame. Then there were the others. They called the investigation a threat to Red Hollow's survival. They said dead men should not steal bread from the living. They said Lena had brought ruin. They said Ethan Cole had been an outsider who should have kept riding. Lena heard all of it. She stayed in the upper room of the Reed house under Martha Reed's protection. Her body was healing, but slowly. The rope marks around her wrists had faded into red scars. Her strength came back in pieces. Some mornings, she could cross the street without stopping. Other mornings, the cold in her bones reminded her of the ravine where Ghost Wind had found her dying. But the worst wounds were not the visible ones. People avoided her in daylight, then left warnings in darkness. One night, a stone shattered the window of the room next to hers. Another morning, Martha found words scratched into the wood outside Lena's door. Let the dead stay dead. Martha wanted to call the marshals back immediately. Lena stood in the hallway reading the words with a stillness that made the older woman ache. They cannot watch me forever, Lena said. They can arrest whoever did this. Lena looked toward the window toward the street below. Arresting one hand will not stop the body it belongs to. Martha said nothing after that. Lena had learned something Red Hollow did not want her to learn. Finding the truth was not the end. Keeping it alive was the dangerous part. Ethan Cole had left Red Hollow after the marshals arrived. He told himself it was time. He was no lawman, no judge, no preacher. He had done what the horse had led him to do. He had helped Lena bring the lockbox into the light. That should have been enough. But the farther he rode, the less convinced he became. He rode east through open country and tried to return to the old rhythm of drifting work and quiet nights. But every campfire carried him back to that mine. Every white flicker of mist between trees looked for one breath like Ghost Wind's mane. He woke more than once in the dark, certain he had heard hoofbeats outside his shelter. There was never anything there. Only wind, only memory. One cold afternoon, rain caught him at an old relay station miles from the main trail. He had just unsaddled his horse when a rider came in hard from the west coat-soaked hat brim dripping. You, Ethan Cole. Ethan turned slowly. Depends who's asking. The rider pulled a folded letter from inside his coat. Martha Reed sent me. Ethan took it. The paper was damp at the edges, and the writing hurried and uneven. They are coming for her again. Briggs was not the last one. If you meant to ride away, ride faster back. Ethan read the words once, then again. He folded the letter, slid it into his coat, and walked to his horse. The messenger blinked. You leaving now? In this rain? Ethan tightened the cinch. No, he said. I'm going back. He rode through the night. By the time Ethan returned to Red Hollow, rain had turned the street to black mud. The town looked smaller in the dark, meaner somehow. Lamps were low behind curtains. Doors were locked early. The only light that seemed to welcome him came from the rear window of the Reed house. Martha let him in through the back door. You came, she whispered. You said they were coming for her. Martha's face was drawn with exhaustion. They already started. She told him about the fire. A storage room where duplicate statements and supporting papers had been kept had burned 2 nights earlier. It happened just after the lead marshal left town to carry part of the evidence to Cheyenne. No one died, but several secondary records were destroyed. Whoever set the fire knew exactly what to burn. Martha said, not the whole building, not the obvious things. just enough to weaken the case. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Inside help, Martha nodded, or someone close enough to know the marshal's movements. Where's Lena? Martha hesitated. Ethan's jaw tightened. Martha. She went to Hollow Ridge. Before sundown. She said she needed to sit with her father, and she hasn't come back, nor Ethan was already moving. Rain still fell in thin, cold sheets as he rode up toward Hollow Ridge. The path was muddy, slick, and cut by recent wagon wheels. When he reached the mine, the temporary burial ground stood behind rope and wooden stakes placed by the marshals. Several stakes had been pulled loose. One of the marker boards had been split in half. Lena stood alone near the mine entrance, her coat soaked through her dark hair stuck to her face. In one hand she held Daniel Greyhawk's necklace. She did not turn when Ethan approached. I wondered how long it would take the horse to bring you back, she said. Ethan looked around. Ghost wind. She shook her head. I have not seen him, but I hear him some nights. Ethan dismounted and studied the ground. Someone's been here. Yes. Vandals number Lena knelt beside a disturbed patch of mud. They were looking. For what that is what frightens me. She pulled a charred scrap of paper from inside her coat. It had been saved from the burned storage room. Most of the writing was gone, but one partial name remained near the torn edge. Pierce. Ethan stared at it. Does that mean something to you? Lena asked. Maybe. His voice lowered. Judge Alton Pierce. Lena looked at him. He sits in Cheyenne, Ethan said. Powerful man. Signed off on land claims all over the territory. If his name is connected to Hollow Ridge, then Briggs was not the top of it, Lena finished. No. Briggs held the gun. Pierce may have held the pen. Lena's expression hardened. The pen made the blood legal? That night they returned to Red Hollow together. Martha told them the first hearing in Cheyenne was only days away. Lena was the strongest living witness. Without her, the defense could claim the lockbox was planted at the papers forged, the entire matter stirred up by grief and outsiders. Someone was already spreading those lies. By morning, Ethan heard them himself. In the street, a man said Lena had invented ghost wind to frighten people. Another claimed Ethan had coached her story for money. Someone else muttered that no court would trust a half-starved woman with ghosts in her head. Ethan understood the shape of the attack. Burn the records, threaten the witness, destroy her name, then kill her if that failed. That night, he sat in the dark room across from Lena's window rifle, across his lap. Just past midnight, two men appeared in the alley behind the Reed house. They did not knock. They did not speak. They watched Lena's window. Ethan slipped out the back, circled wide, and came up behind them. One saw him too late and ran. The other bolted toward the wagon yard. Ethan caught him near a broken feed trough, slammed him into the mud, and twisted his arm behind his back. The man dropped a folded paper. Ethan picked it up. It was Lena's travel schedule to Cheyenne. The route, the time, the escort plan. When Ethan showed it to the marshal assigned to Red Hollow, and the man reacted with anger, but not surprise. That troubled Ethan more than any denial could have. Lena noticed it too. Someone gave that schedule away, she said later. Martha gave them the name neither of them wanted to hear. Caleb Voss, a young deputy marshal, quiet, polite, too often seen speaking with men from the old Red Hollow families. Ethan followed Caleb the next night. Near the livery under the cover of rain and darkness, Caleb met a man in a black coat. The stranger gave him a thick envelope. Ethan stepped from the shadows, but a loose board betrayed him. The man in black ran. Ethan went after Caleb. The chase tore through back alleys, over stacked crates, past shuttered windows, where frightened faces appeared and vanished. Caleb was younger and fast, but panic made him careless. Ethan caught him at the edge of the creek and drove him face first into the mud. Caleb broke quickly. "I didn't know they'd kill her," he gasped. "I swear, I only gave Roots times. That's all. Who paid you? I don't know his name." Ethan pressed harder. Caleb groaned. He carried a court seal, regional court, Pierce's seal. Lena stood silent when Ethan brought back the confession. Judge Alton Pierce was no longer a suspicion. He was moving against them. Before Caleb was taken away, fear loosened one more secret from his mouth. "The man in black asked about someone else," Caleb said. "Old man. Silas Crow." Martha went pale. Lena turned to her. "You know that name." Martha sat slowly. "Silas worked Hollow Ridge the year your father disappeared. Everyone thought he died years ago." "But he didn't," Ethan said. Martha shook her head. "He lives north of the valley, old camp near Crow Creek. Hides from people, hides from himself maybe." Lena's voice was barely above a whisper. "He was there. If Pierce is asking after him," Ethan said, "then Silas knows something worth killing for." Lena stood. "Then we find him first." Before they left, they rode once more to Hollow Ridge to gather supplies hidden near the mine. The rain had stopped. The ground was soft. Lena suddenly halted. Ethan followed her gaze. In the mud near the northern trail were hoof prints. Deep, clean, alone. No human tracks beside them. Ethan crouched and touched the edge of one print. Lena looked north toward the dark timber. "He knows," she said. Ghost Wind was nowhere to be seen. But his trail had returned. They left Red Hollow before dawn, following the white horse's invisible promise north. The hoof prints led them away from the main roads, through wet pine forest, and across a creek so cold it turned Ethan's legs numb to the knee. Sometimes the tracks vanished on stone or under fallen needles. Each time Ethan thought they had lost the trail, another print appeared exactly where the path divided. After everything he had seen, Ethan no longer questioned it. Lena noticed. "You believe now." Ethan glanced at the mud and then at the empty trees ahead. "I believe that horse knows more honest trails than most men." Near noon, they found the camp. It sat in a hollow between pines, half collapsed, hidden by brush. Thin smoke rose from a crooked chimney. Before they reached the door, a gun barrel appeared through a gap in the wall. "Turn around," an old voice barked. "I won't warn twice." Ethan lifted both hands. Silas Crow, the barrel shook. Lena stepped forward carefully. "My name is Lena Greyhawk. Daniel Greyhawk was my father." For a moment there was no sound, except rainwater dripping from branches. Then the door creaked open. Silas Crow was little more than Bones Beard and haunted eyes. He stared at Lena as if the dead had walked into his yard. When she showed him Daniel's necklace, the old man began to weep. "I heard them," he whispered. "I heard them breathing under the rock." Inside the shack, Silas told them what guilt had been eating from him for years. He had helped seal the east shaft. Not because he wanted blood, he said, but because Briggs and Pierce told the miners they would be killed too if they refused. "I was a coward," Silas said. "Cowards live long. That's the punishment." Then he told them the part no ledger had contained. Daniel had not died when the shaft was sealed. After the first blast, he found a narrow vent and nearly escaped. But when he heard the others still alive behind the rock, he went back trying to open a way for them. Pierce and Briggs caught him near the east vent. "He was bleeding," Silas whispered. "But he still stood like a chief." "What did he do?" Lena asked. Silas looked at her. He hid something. Ethan leaned forward. What? I don't know. But I heard him speak to the horse before they took him. Lena's eyes filled. Silas repeated the words. Carry what men cannot burn. The room went still. Silas explained that Daniel had removed Ghostwind's saddle before he was captured again. After the killing, the horse vanished. Men tried to catch it for years, afraid it carried some final proof. No one could. But there was a cave, Silas said. North Ridge. Daniel used it when hunting. If the saddle still exists, it'll be there. Before they could leave, hoofbeats struck the wet ground outside. Not one horse. 3. Men in black coats rode into the camp with rifles drawn. They did not call Silas's name. They opened fire. Ethan dragged Lena and Silas out the back as bullets tore through the shack walls. Silas, old but familiar with every root and ditch around the camp, pointed Ethan toward a narrow drainage cut behind the cabin. They ran low through wet brush. One gunman circled too wide and came up behind Lena. She turned, fired, and drove him back long enough for Ethan to finish the fight. Silas took a graze along the ribs, but stayed upright, teeth clenched. As the last rider fled, he shouted back through the trees, Pierce will bury every voice before Cheyenne. And Ethan looked at Lena. No more doubt. Pierce was killing witnesses. They reached Daniel's cave by late afternoon, guided again by hoofprints that appeared where no horse should have passed. The entrance was hidden behind brush and fallen stone. Inside were old ashes, a broken rein, and Daniel's mark carved into the wall. In the deepest corner beneath a rotted hide, Ethan found the saddle. Lena knelt beside it with trembling hands. The leather was dry and cracked, but one seam had been repaired differently from the rest. She cut it open with her knife. Inside was a small wax-sealed leather tube. Lena opened it carefully. Within lay a handwritten statement. Daniel Greyhawk's final testimony. His words named Briggs, the mine owners, the founding families, and Judge Alton Pierce. Not as a man who later approved stolen land, but as the architect of the trap. Pierce had written the false agreements before the meeting. Pierce had promised legal protection before the killings. Pierce had turned murder into paperwork before the blood had even dried. There was also a second map marking burial sites outside the east shaft. Lena held the pages as if they were her father's hands. For a long time, she could not speak. Silas lowered himself to his knees. I'm sorry, he said. I should have spoken. Lena wiped her eyes, but her voice remained steady. Then speak now. They rode for Cheyenne that same evening. The hearing was 2 days away. Pierce's men were already on the roads. They chased Ethan, Lena, and Silas across the wet grassland through narrow stone cuts and over an old wooden bridge that groaned beneath the horses. Silas nearly fell twice. Lena turned back for him both times. Ethan shot the bridge supports after they crossed, dropping enough of the span to slow the riders behind them. But near sunset, more horsemen appeared ahead. Ethan reined in hard. Then on a distant ridge, a white horse stepped into view. Ghostwind. It did not come close. It only turned and disappeared into a narrow canyon. Ethan did not hesitate. This way. The canyon carried them around the ambush and into Cheyenne, just as the hearing had already begun. Inside the crowded chamber, Judge Alton Pierce stood calm, dignified and untouched by fear. He spoke like a man who believed law belonged to whoever held the seal. He called Lena unstable. He called Ethan a drifter. He called Silas a guilty old fool trying to purchase peace with lies. Then Lena placed Daniel Greyhawk's statement before the court. Silas confirmed the handwriting. The second map was compared with notes from the original lockbox. The locations matched hidden burial references no one outside the conspiracy should have known. Silas told the room what he had heard near the east vent. Pierce's voice. His order. No witness leaves this mountain breathing. For the first time, Judge Pierce lost control of his face. He tried to leave. A marshal blocked the door. Lena lifted the final page and read her father's last words aloud. If I do not return, let the horse carry my truth farther than my body can. No one spoke after that. Pierce was arrested in the room where he had expected to bury the truth under law. In the weeks that followed, Hollow Ridge became more than a town scandal. It became a case that shook the territory. Land was returned. Reparations were ordered. A memorial was planned at the mine. Silas accepted punishment for his part, but his testimony helped break the larger conspiracy. Lena was no longer just a survivor. She became the voice of those who had been sealed behind stone. Ethan tried to leave Cheyenne before anyone could thank him. But outside the courthouse, in the pale morning mist, Ghostwind stood at the far edge of the street. No saddle on its back, no rope at its neck, just the white horse watching. Lena stepped beside Ethan, her expression soft and sorrowful. Ghostwind lowered his head once. Then he turned and walked toward the hills. This time, when the mist closed around him, no hoofprints remained. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Guess he's done leading us. Lena looked at the empty road. No, she said. He led us far enough. And for the first time, they were no longer following a ghost from the past. They were choosing the road ahead for themselves. For me, this story is not only about uncovering a buried crime, it is also about the courage to listen when truth comes from an unexpected place. Sometimes the world gives us signs through people, animals' memories, or quiet feelings we cannot explain. Ethan could have ignored Ghostwind and kept riding, but he chose to follow. That choice changed everything. To me, the deeper message is that justice often begins with one person willing to pay attention when everyone else looks away. Thank you so much for watching and staying with this story until the end. If this journey touched you or made you think, please support the channel by liking the video, leaving a comment, and subscribing for more emotional and powerful stories. See you in the next one.